Welcome to Destination Change, a podcast where we talk recovery, treatment, and more. I'm your host, Angie Fiedler-Sutton, with the National Behavioral Health Association Providers, and I use she, her pronouns. Our guest today is Dr. Louise Stanger. Dr. Stanger is a preeminent interventionist, family clinician/coach, and thought leader in the behavioral health, mental health, and addiction industry. She serves as Director of Family Services for YPM, a global initiative to help mitigate risk. She also serves as a clinician interventionalist for the Balanced Mallorca, Zurich, London. Dr. Louise has received many distinguished awards for her work. She is a prolific writer with over 500 blog posts and magazine and newspaper articles, and is the author of 4 books. She continues to do her own original work looking at families, trauma, and how one can help others matter in a world full of chaos. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Stanger.
Oh my God, Angie, it's so good to be with you. How are you?
I am as good as I can be considering.
Well, I'm a little jet lagged because I just returned from London where I spoke at a conference. But I'm raring to go. Always love talking with you.
Awesome. Well, my first question is I always like to hear origin story. So how did you get into the recovery space versus all of the other job options that are out there?
Oh, that's a great question. How I got in the recovery space, I think, was because of family of origin issues. I was born on a fault line of trauma, whereby I was actually, my father died by suicide when I was 7. My mother had a substance use disorder. Mental health cascaded around my family as if it were a Christmas bow. And I was helped great deal as a young woman by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Leon Rubenstein, who was then the director, a social worker, a camp called Wood Echo. And after my father died tragically and suddenly, I was given the opportunity to go to camp. And I was at the ripe old age of 7. But throughout the time, he really helped mentor me, and so did some other social workers. When I went to go to college, I had no clue. I was an English lit major with a sociology minor, and I had to work my way through. And I was at a vintage age where Martin Luther King was alive. I marched for Martin. I burned my bra, just like Helen Reddy said. And my first job out of college was Allegheny County Department of Public Welfare. And there I sort of cut my teeth on being of service to other people. And that made me feel good. When I married my first husband, in those days, he was a Navy dentist and he was always stationed somewhere else. We were sent to San Diego, and I thought I was going to get a job at the Urban League. But nobody was hiring a cute little Caucasian girl following the death of Martin. And also, I was supposed to be a lawyer. My initials as a kid spelled law, but I couldn't find the law school. So I luckily found the School of Social Work, which at that time was at San Diego State College. I applied late because I was just out there, and I fell in love. I fell in love with being of service. I fell in love with social work. I fell in love with writing. And I've been blessed with some wonderful mentors. Dr. Glenn O. Hayward, who was a small chortle of a man. He had been to Berkeley. And what he said was anybody in the world could be authentic. And you could create your own way of authenticity of being. And he believed in me. And that was really important to me because I had had so many personal tragedies in my lifetime, really 6 sudden deaths. And he took me under his wing, so to speak. He let me string poetry because I had been an English lit major, let me do it. I did pretty well as a young 20-year-old in graduate school. And when I graduated, they invited me to teach. I don't know what they were thinking, but this again was a time where Roe versus Wade passed. I did all the therapeutic abortion counseling in lieu of a psychiatrist, and I taught human behavior. And I felt like I had found a calling. How did I get involved in the substance abuse and use field? It was really simple. I grew up dancing. Alcoholism, mental health just swirled around me, undulated before my very eyes. And at the time that I started teaching, San Diego State University was known as the #1 party school in the nation. And there was national grant money available to help reduce risks for alcohol and other drug problems on college campuses. I had the distinction of being the first professor in the country to develop a graduate seminar in substance use and misuse. I guess why did I become an interventionist? At that time, nobody, I didn't know a lot, but I was in San Diego. Betty Ford was just across in the desert. And we would bring guest lecturers into my course so we could learn. And one of the people that came into my course was a man by the name of Dr. Frank Picard. As short as I am, Angie, he was tall and stately. And he was the CEO of a then treatment center called Springbrook. He had also been best friends with a gentleman named Vern Johnson, who's known as the granddaddy of intervention, although he wrote a book that's a little bit different. He wrote a book called Family Intervention. Well, I don't know what happened that day in my classroom. My heart stopped. He was describing my family, and I listened, and I said I could do that. So, there's all these trainings, but I was mentored by the big ones, and I decided I could do that. So in between working, I didn't like the idea of a surprise. I thought that was kind of really hard. I didn't think I could be a lone ranger doing interventions alone. So I learned it under his tutelage. I stayed at the university. I did them on the side. I had a good run at the university. I had over $5 million worth of NIH and IAAA grants. But there came a time when I wanted to leave. And at that point in time, you'll laugh because I'm 78, so this really dates me. I decided I would put together a 2-sheet about myself. And I said, I will call my company All About Interventions, AAI. Why? Because I could be the first in the yellow pages. So I'm sure half of your readers have no idea what the yellow pages are today. And so that's how I started. It was a confluence of having great mentors, personal experience with the devastation of mental health, substance abuse, death by suicide, and a belief that in resiliency and a belief that there could be a blueprint for change.
Speaking of recovery, one of the goals of Destination Change is to talk about recovery as a journey and that it's not just a straight line, that it can go all about. What does it mean to you to go through treatment or recovery? How do you define that?
Oh my God. I think recovery is an opportunity. I think treatment is an opportunity. I think that there's many different ways to map out a blueprint for success. Oftentimes people will need inpatient treatment. They may need medical detox because of the alcohol and other drugs they can use. They may well need counseling. They may well need trauma work. But after all of that, if in a residential setting, they also need to be able to create a blueprint for success and be able to change the way they are and how they interact in the world. If we talk about the disease, and I do believe that alcoholism or substance abuse is a brain disease, it's been pretty well established. Recurrence is part of that disease, and being able to rekindle and rechange and refocus is really important. I do a lot of work with families. And part and parcel with a family is they too have to change. It's not just about what I call the identified loved one who has been identified with an alcohol, mental health, chronic pain, trauma problem. They too must change in terms of their responses. In fact, one of the books I wrote has a chapter in it, Nothing Changes Till Something Changes. And that means 90% of my work is done with family. And unless they change, the person, the identified loved one, really has a hard time changing unless the boundaries, the way the world is changed. So I think through my lifetime, there's been many different iterations. Obviously, I've experienced a lot of sudden death in my lifetime. I've had a lot of great opportunities from working with the widows of 9/11 and the New York Fire Department to working with a young dynamic group right now, such as youth prevention mentors who try to mitigate risk of young adults, to suddenly deciding to write a fourth book, which is really fun, which is sassy, which is a really blueprint for how you can have successful aging and longevity. So for me, change is always possible. Growth is always possible. It does take a lot of work and you have to be willing to do the work. But along the way, there are hiccups. There are pauses. There are things that you have to be processed. But I always feel that you have to be able to talk about the tough stuff. Having a mentor, having a counselor, I think is of utmost importance. If we just listen to our own voices, we can get into a lot of trouble. And then figure out ways to let the music in. Figure out ways in which we can smile and figure out what it is that you want to do with who you are and how you want to do it. And then do that, given your limitations of age, given your physical capabilities, given your financial capabilities. Because for me, there is always hope. There's always a blueprint for success.
Well, you gave me a lot to follow up on. Let's start with, you mentioned, that there are issues sometimes with recovery. That's one of the things we talk about too. What are some of the barriers you feel people come across to move forward in the recovery journey?
Well, I don't know whether they've had, I think a lot of things are there's not either to mitigate risk. A lot of people think the only thing you need to do is to go to medical detox or you need to go to inpatient treatment. And there is no work done on the outside when you leave and go somewhere else. I mean, there's a saying, recovery begins when treatment ends. So you have to have that scaffolding built, whether it's a 12-step group, whether it's a psychiatrist for med management, whether it's family work. There's all these different things that happen that one must take be able to create. The other thing is if the people around you, I work a lot with young adults and people that have parents. It's really important. Nothing's going to change until that parent changes as well. And being able to set up healthy communication and healthy boundaries. Also, I think there's I guess it's the omnipotence of arrogance that pops in that somehow or other, I don't need this anymore. They talk about ego, that somehow or other I'm cured, or a lot of times people will go working in the field and they say, well, we're working in the field, we're helping other people, but they don't have a program of their own. They don't see a therapist, they don't go to 12-step or any step, and that will take them out because they haven't been paying attention to their own way of helping. So you have to take care of yourself physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually are consistent with your values. And what does that mean? Does it mean you do a grateful list every morning? Do you do a grateful list every night? Do you attend some type of self-support meeting? Are you of service? Do you, if you're dually diagnosed, do you take the appropriate medication? Do you routinely unpack and talk about things? Do you take time and exercise? Where do you find your joy? And there's a lot that goes into recovery. And then there is life circumstances. How do I create that? I'm going to stop for a minute. Recently I celebrated my 78th birthday in two very strange ways. My daughter, Felicia Alexander, invited me to go to Donovan State Correctional Institute for the DEFY program. And I started out really as a social work professor with people that were in and out of prison. So it's a long time ago. And the DEFY program is an entrepreneurial and training program for people that may never get out of prison. And they be serving 20, 24 years. I guess Donovan's famous right now because that's where the Mendez brothers are. But they have a year-long program, which is pretty rigorous, which allows people to teach how to be an entrepreneur in training, to work on themselves and to be the person that they're meant to be. And I was so deeply moved. I spent the night before my 78th at Donovan State Prison, and it brought back old things, but I was able to break up into some small groups. And the people I was with, it's hard to say, you know, are they bad? Do they really deserve to have life sentences? Or is redemption? And what I found was, of the people I was with, 3 of them were Phi Beta Kappas. And they weren't white collar crimes. They found ways to make meaning in a very existential Kafkaesque way, to create meaning. They worked with each other. And, sometimes after 22 years, they might get out of prison. To me, that is true recovery. There's no incentive for these people to do something with facing those kinds of sentences. And yet they found birth and meaning, school and education. And I will tell you, I have had numerous awards. But I will tell you, that night in this gymnasium, when 60 incarcerated men who were members of this entrepreneur in training gathered in a circle and saying happy birthday to me, I don't know where, outside of working when I started with people in and out of prison at San Diego State, my heart was so humbled and full of joy. And they all had their own stories. One had been a policeman, and I don't know, it was in Tennessee, who knows? Another person was transgender. I don't even know how they survived in a maximum security prison. Another one was a young man who had been in a gang. And all these people had stories, and that's what you forget, that everybody has a story, that everybody might be worthwhile. And in the harshness that's there, but within those confines, which is maybe a no exit, they could find release, they could find sobriety, they could find joy, and they could be of service to others. I mean, that was so, I wrote about it. If you go to my blog, I wrote about it because I thought it was just so moving and meaningful. And yes, it's not just a one shot. My family will be back. And I thank Felicia Alexander for saying, Mom, you got to see this program.
Sounds great. You mentioned your blog, so let's move on to your writing and your books. Talk a little bit about kind of, not where the idea came from, obviously, since they're nonfiction, but basically where you got the impetus to create the book and what you're hoping to accomplish.
So, okay. Well, I write for blogs. Let me just I write on everything. I write on trauma is the most overused word. I wrote, it's okay to be grumpy following the election, because no matter who you are, you might have been grumpy. I wrote about election anxiety recently. I wrote about going across the pond. But this book, Reflections on Aging, has a serendipitous beginning. When I lived in West Hollywood for a while, which was very different than after I left university, I would walk by every morning to go to exercise to this wonderful hotel. It's called the Sunset Marquis. And I talked to everybody, okay? So I started talking to the doorman, and they were wonderful, and it was friendly, and it was nice, and it made a big city not so small. As time went on, I did family work there. I've done interventions there. I've laughed there. I stayed there. And there was something about the space which is rich with rock history. On any given day, you're going to find someone famous there, but it's so under the radar. And it's the home of Morrison Gallery, which is a famous photography. Along the way, I decided, I need some new headshots for my website. And so I am very lucky to know a woman by the name of Cheryl Fox. If you don't know her, look her up. She is a world famous photographer. She's African American, the likes of Beyonce, et cetera, et cetera. And I knew Cheryl, and I said, Cheryl, let's go do a shoot, at which I need some shots. And she said, great. It was a great idea. So we took over the entire Sunset Marquee one day, and they wondered, well, I said, well, we're just doing a photo shoot. From the photo shoot, which is usually, when you're writing a song, it's the words and the lyrics. Well, for this, it was the pictures. It was the synergy. I don't know. I walked out of the photo shoot and I wrote down on a piece of paper the chapters, the chapter titles. Let the music in. Reflect. Talk about the tough stuff. I know I'm not doing it in order because this just came out yesterday. So excited. And be active. Reflect. Me, talk about the tough stuff. Don't be afraid to do it. Put your big girl panties on. Okay, we've got to do life. And then last is celebrate her when I grow old. I'm going to live at the Sunset Marquee, which doesn't mean I'm going to figuratively live there. I'm going to live with that mindset. And so these words sort of poured out of me pretty quickly. I had written a book quickly before, but in about 3 months, this book was done. And with Cheryl's help, we just laced this book together and said, this is different. It's about unleashing your potential. It's got something for everyone. I just talked about it a little bit in London, different, and some man came to, I just took up painting. Oh my gosh, I'm going to go talk about this. I'm going to talk about the tough stuff. And, realizing that when you age, you creak and groan a bit, that there's still all this possibility for you to be who you want to be. So I thank the Marquis for being a muse, for Cheryl, for her photography. It was like, a song when you have lyrics and words. It just all popped together.
And what do you hope audiences, readers get out of this? What are you trying to get what is your main goal for people who are going to read this book?
My main goal is for them to unleash their own potential. At the back of every chapter, there's place to have notes for you, and you can write me about what you're doing and how this affected you. Unleashing your thoughts is at every corner. What does this do for you? And how does this apply to you or how it doesn't? Talk about the tough stuff. Maybe you've just experienced a death. Maybe you've experienced some type of disease. What is it that unleashes you that you're now free enough to do? And so it's very non-clinical in that respect. And I'm obviously a clinician, but it's your blueprint. You get to write the music.
That sounds wonderful. Did you want to talk a little bit about some of your other books by any chance?
Well, my other book, the one that's been the most popular bestseller was the one written COVID. It's called Addiction in the Family, Helping Families Navigate Challenges, Emotions, and Recovery. Great book. It still sells like wildfire today. I don't get receivables, but it really talks about what do I say, what do I do, and how do I actually work and address. And it's very helpful for families because when a family calls me up, they've nagged, they pleaded, they scolded, they yelled, they tear their hair out, they begged, borrowed. And this gives people a way in which to communicate. It also talks about what do you look for in treatment, or what do you look for if you're going to hire somebody. So it's a very good, practical, quick, easy book. My second book is a textbook. It's still used at universities. It's very fancy. It's the Definitive Guide to Addiction Intervention, and it talks about family mapping. And my first book was autobiographical. It was called Falling Up.
Some of the biggest changes you've seen in the industry since you first started?
I think there's a lot of big equities owning things as opposed to mom and pop. I think that's one change. I think there is more recognition. Well, in the beginning, alcohol was seen as something, I don't know, a moral failing. Now it's known, thanks to the AMA, as a disease. There is more recognition of dual diagnosis. And I think the most popular thing of this decade is trauma. It's like everything is trauma. I have an article that says trauma is the most overused word in the country. I don't mean that in a negative sense. but I don't know anybody who, someone said, "Oh, yeah, I don't think you've ever experienced trauma." I said, "Really? Seven sudden deaths? Oh, I think that might have been a hiccup or two. Working with the New York Fire Department when 9/11 happened may have had something." I mean, Lark Young did a great job identifying trauma, but sometimes everything it's like it's the most overused word in the country. People experience problems. People have terrible problems in living. It's really how then do we quote calm the ventral vagal nerve? Has done a great job in talking about that. How then can we help move people? EDMR, the advent of some modalities which weren't always there. But I think a recognition that people change over time, that just going to treatment, residential treatment, may not be the end. When I work with the young group, YPM, we do a lot of mitigation of risk. We actually do a lot of times treatment without walls, which is very novel, which is, going into the home, which is harder when you have a family because you're actually working to change the whole family. Can take a longer process, but it's very, very exciting. So I think more equity owned, more big business, and also, I guess, you know, there's things that are on a national or global level, the legalization of marijuana. I mean, personally, I think that was a horrible idea. I have, on a personal level, so many people that are in substance abuse psychosis. That doesn't mean it's not helpful for glaucoma or maybe aging or Alzheimer's, but it doesn't have to be on every corner store and every kid in the world smoking it because the THC content is such. We're going through a new wave right now. I don't have enough knowledge to comment intelligently, and that's on psychedelics. Should psychedelics be used? What is the read on ketamine assisted treatment? Do we drop some ibogaine? These are all still not evidence-based. I think that while our knowledge has expanded, we have a lot of different modalities. I also think we have to take into account, because I have an expertise in chronic pain, physical. What does that mean in terms of how we address people? So while in many respects we came a long way, baby, I think we have a lot more to go. We do live in a country where youth still undulates before your eyes, and the notion of a quick fix, feel good, is paramount.
Well, and speaking of where we're going, since you have the experience you have, where do you see the industry going in the next 5 to 10 years? Would you say what kind of things do you think are going to be happening?
Well, I don't know if there'll be a disappearance of the small business owner taken over by large equity capital. I think that we're going to have to I think the medication assisted treatment will continue to grow. I think somebody's going to have to take a really harsh look at marijuana, cannabis, because they don't call it marijuana, because God forbid you should say that, but the cannabis industry and how it affects, as well as psychedelics. And I think personally for me, because it represents this book, going into an integrative wellness approach. How can we be the person we're meant to be with an integrated wellness coach, which is physical, spiritual, are consistent with your values, mental, and how do we build wellness and longevity into it?
Now, our audience is a wide range of people. We have everything from clinicians to CEOs. So I always like to ask kind of tips for people in the industry. What kind of lessons have you learned since, what if you could travel back in time to when you were first starting, what kind of things would you tell yourself?
My God, learning never ends, be open, stay curious, because things will change over time. Be thoughtful. Don't jump to rash conclusions. I do something called family mapping, which I'm famous for, but I interview people individually. I don't do preconceived notions of who somebody is. And most of all, think outside the box. In a perfect world, what would this take for this person or this family to succeed. Be open to failure because not everything you do is going to be a great success. How can you use your setbacks to improve? And learning never ends. So if you think you know everything, I used to teach human behavior and I used to laugh. So you would see everybody wanted to be a therapist when they grew up. That's what they tell you in the classroom. And then they would say, well, I'm going to be, I'm going to be just like right now, like internal family systems. Richard Schwartz is really popular, or EDMR or Martha Linehan. I'm going to just do DBT. I'm just going to do parts. I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to do that. Well, and the truth is, once you identify yourself, you're going to violate whatever stance you take because you have to be able to join up with those clients. And in 7 seconds, this is still evidence-based. In 7 seconds, when you meet an identified loved one or client, they decide if they like you or not. They decide if they can trust you. And it might be your voice, it might be the way you look. So be mindful of that. And also be mindful that people are on a journey. They didn't necessarily, I'm harking back to Donovan Correctional Institute. These people were real people. They weren't monsters. They had lives. They were somebody's son. They were somebody's father. And what were the life circumstances that brought them there? And what could we do to change that? And that's the way you have to treat with every client. People do things that are very harmful to other people. They lie, they cheat, they steal, and you do that. So I guess it's being open and also seeking consultation. Never be arrogant enough to think you know everything. To this day, I have a fabulous supervisor, a fabulous psychologist that I consult with. I also work with a team there. Everybody consults with everybody else. Don't think you know everything, because the moment you know everything, something's going to pop up. You go, oh, I didn't know that.
Well, and speaking of which, aside from your own website, what kind of resources do you go to on a regular basis to kind of keep up on the industry?
Well, I read almost every day. I do like from London. I love Deidre Boyd, DB Resources. It's a daily digest, and it will look at a lot of research. There's a lot of NIH research coming out. There's a lot of things, but also there's popular stuff. It's very important for you to understand what the People magazines are sprouting. What they're saying. Is it just so you can be really aware? Or I don't do TikTok, but TikTok obviously has been influential. It's really important that you understand your culture and who you're with, and that you are able to understand the different generational divides. When I work with YPM, I work with a generational team. I work with young wellness mentors who may be in their 30s or younger. They know a whole lot of things different than I do. Their frame is different. So you have to be really open, and you have to stay, you have to know what you know, and you have to be able to say, hey, this case isn't going to work for me. I want to give this to someone else.
Great. Now we're getting close to the end. Was there something that you wanted to talk about, but that we haven't, or that you thought I was going to ask, but I didn't?
No, I just love talking to you, and I love talking. I think, as I reach this time, it's legacy. I'm after, look, I've been so lucky. If I get one more Lifetime Achievement Award, I know they want me to retire. I was honored at Miriam's house this year with a Lifetime Achievement Award. In March, I'm getting a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Winter Leadership Summit. That's all really nice. But then I think, well, maybe, it's an honor to do that. And if I can be of service, good. And if I'm not of service, please let me know. And, I want to keep learning and growing. And what I think about in terms of theories of human behavior, Erik Erikson was a theoretician, and what he believed in was 8 stages of man. But what he said, there had to be basic trust in the world. And in order to have basic trust in the world, there was someone walking around with ego integrity. And what that meant is that you learn from one another. And my hope is that people stay open enough to learning. They stay open to questioning. What should I say? What should I do? How can I do this? What is the best service delivery here? And how can I create an environment, a blueprint for success so people can be who they want to be?
That is a great way to end this. Now, I know you have the Ask Dr. Louise radio show. You also have your own YouTube channel. Where else if people want to learn more about you and what you do, where can they find you?
Well, definitely on my website, which is www.allaboutinterventions.com. I am definitely on the website for Youth Prevention Mentors. I am also on the Balance Group's website, which is in Mallorca, which is an international. And I if they want to really, I write a blog every week. So they have to go to allaboutinterventions.com and my face pops up and they just fill out a little box and I will answer them. And the other big thing is I'm still pick up my own phone. So I don't have an answer machine. So if your heart is hurting or you want to ask a question or you're worried about a loved one or you just have a comment on something that I wrote, you can pick up the phone, dial 619-507-1699, and I will answer it. If I'm busy, I will call you back. But I'm known for doing that. And I think like this week, my mailing is going to be The Hidden Impact of Family Substance Abuse, Siblings Under the Shadow. So that's a different thing.
I was going to say, for those who are interested, you do have a newsletter that sends out like your blog posts. I know NBHAP is a subscriber as well because we sometimes use your blog posts in our social media. And it's a good way to keep up with what's going on as well. So you've been listening to Destination Change. Our guest today was Dr. Louise Stanger. Thank you for being here. Our theme song was Sun Nation by Keatsa and used via Creative Commons license by the Free Music Archive. Please consider rating and reviewing the podcast on Apple Podcasts so we can get more listeners. In the meantime, you can always see more about the podcast, including show notes and where else to listen, on our website, www.nbhap.org. If you have questions for the podcast, please email us at info@nbhap.org. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. I hope that took. That sounded better than the first one. I don't know.
Hopefully it took. I will let you know pretty much as soon as it's done rendering.
Okay. All right.
So, thank you very much for understanding and for doing this again. I appreciate it. I could talk to you forever. Unfortunately, I'm sure we both are very, very busy.
Yeah. Well, will you send me where to find it so I can, I will put it in my newsletter, but I need to have all that information.
Yeah. Once it goes live, I will send you an email that kind of lists the link and also gives you a if you want social media images to let us know and whatnot. And forward you the email we send out. But awesome. Well, if you have any questions between now and then, you know how to get a hold of me. Have a great day, and may your day be uneventful.
Thank you. And be sure and buy this book and write a review. Okay.
Exactly.
All right. Okay. Bye.
Bye.